All right, we are live here in the green room for DisrupTV. We've got two amazing guests, but first of all, I've got an amazing co-host, co-founder, Vala Afshar, our producer, Elle. She is visible today. And more importantly, our two guests we'll introduce in reverse order. Paul, where are we coming in from today? What are we talking about?
We're talking about leadership, the future of leadership, and how we need a different kind of leader with disruptive leadership capabilities to successfully navigate ongoing disruption. So keen to get into that and get your thoughts on all of that.
Yeah, I mean, the amount of change that is going to happen is going to be great. I can't wait to hear from you. Joe, where are you coming in from?
I am coming in from Austin, Texas, and I'm really happy to be here and looking forward to the discussion with the team.
Very, very cool. All right. Well, hey, thanks for being here. And let's all kick off the show. Elle, give us the count.
All right. 3, 2, 1.
Hello and welcome. Thank you for joining us on DisrupTV. My name is Wang Vala Afshar. I'm the Chief Evangelist at Salesforce and your co-host for the next hour. We welcome you to join us on X at DisrupTV show. Send Ray, myself, our distinguished guests, your questions live, and we'll do our best to answer them. It's my pleasure to introduce my co-host, Ray Wang. He's the CEO, founder of Constellation Research. He's the best-selling author of Everybody Wants to Rule the World. I see Ray on TV just about every day. CNBC, Fox Business, Bloomberg, Yahoo Finance. He's everywhere. And in my humble opinion, he's one of the top futurists to follow on X at RWA and G0. Welcome, Ray Wang, to DisrupTV.
Hey, thanks a lot. Here with Vala Afshar, Chief Digital Evangelist for Salesforce. He's also the author of multiple books, which I don't have with me today. Boundless and Autonomous. These are #1 sellers on Amazon. And of course, A Secret to the Path to the Future. And a new one that's coming. One day we'll talk about the title, but it is a hot title. Executives around the world are paying attention to every one of his inspirational and innovative tweets. But more importantly, when he's not hosting, keynoting, or leading events at Salesforce, you can see him on business outlets such as ABC, Bloomberg, and more importantly, you'll be reading about all his insights on ZDNet. But if you haven't seen Vala speak, definitely check him out. He's been everywhere for the last couple of weeks, on the road, live, in person, talking to thousands of people in audiences that are listening to every bit of his insights. All right, with that, we're going to talk about our guest. Who we have to kick it off today on a topic no one's ever heard of.
Yeah, we're so fortunate, Ray, because you and I have a privilege of learning from some of the top CEOs in the world, and no exception here. Joseph Kim, President CEO of DRUID AI. DRUID AI is an end-to-end enterprise-grade AI platform that enables lightning-fast development and deployment of AI agents, knowledge bases, and intelligent apps for teams looking to automate business processes to improve technology return on investment. Joseph, who is President and CEO of DRUID, has a proven track record of leading high-performance teams and scaling AI-driven technology businesses. Joseph has over 2 decades of operating executive experience in applications, infrastructure, and security industries for startups and large enterprises, including being chief architect at General Electric, vice president and GM at Hewlett-Packard Enterprise, and chief product and technology officer at Citrix. Before joining DRUID AI, Joseph was CEO of Sumo Logic, an observability and security SaaS company with an enterprise value nearly $2 billion. Joseph is passionate about helping customers address complex challenges through delivery of powerful innovation and technologies. I had to cut his bio short. We only have 20 minutes. He's done a lot. Welcome, Joseph, to DisrupTV.
Thanks for having me. I wish I had a book to pitch, but
Joseph, you probably have 5 books in you. Anytime we have CEOs that we have a privilege of talking to, when they leave, Ray and I talk about this guy should write a book. So I'm sure that's going to happen here as well.
If you want to co-author something, I'm all for it. So.
Okay.
Hey, we might take you up on that author along with Claude. Claude will join us. But anyways, we are in the hottest topic, Joseph. You've been in this space and you've been around the block in terms of enterprise software, and you're now talking about advanced conversational AI. You're talking about these no-code, low-code platforms, and the whole world's embracing agentic AI. So we spent the last 2 years mucking around, trying to figure out what's good, what's not, what's ready for AI into production, because that's a very different thing than just doing a POC, and you're sitting there in the middle of all this with your customers.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really, really good question, Ray. Obviously, if you think back, way back when in November of 2022, it seems like a long time ago, actually, when ChatGPT 3 actually got launched and people were starting to play around with it, and we were getting super excited about the technology that was unleashed on, mostly for consumer folks. It's no wonder that a lot of folks, in the enterprise space and board members and all the executives started to experiment with a lot of these technologies. It's not a shocker that that was going to happen. Now, it's now been a couple of years, since then. We're now into 2026. And I think more and more what we're starting to find out is that we have to start moving away from just the experimental stage and start looking at how do we actually identify appropriate projects and programs that's going to have really positive outcomes for the enterprise. Yep. And so that journey, a lot of customers are going through now.
Yeah, we're definitely seeing that. And I think an important piece of that is the fact that these are no longer POCs. They're no longer led by chief AI officer. In fact, the CEOs are driving a lot of these decisions, which is like strange for everybody, but it's because of the span of control and the speed that you're seeing in this marketplace.
Yeah, for sure. And even myself, how I ended up getting involved here at DRUID, from moving from running a company like Sumo, was because you can see even a couple of years ago how much this was going to change in terms of the way that enterprises work, right? And so for me, being sort of technologist, I don't know how close I am to getting a futurist pin like Ray has at some point. But looking at it from that perspective, I really felt like if I didn't get involved, earlier on, that things are moving so fast that I'm gonna also miss it, right? So I'm super excited to be a part of it now.
Yeah, certainly the pace of innovation is unlike anything I've experienced in 30 years of being in the tech industry. I just published a ZDNet article, which was based on an IDC research, focused on federal and state government leaders, a survey of about 120 government leaders. And it's amazing that the government leaders said that they believe the government is outpacing private sector for agentic AI implementation. And how bullish these agencies are because it's now a leadership mandate where in order for you to justify your budget, you have to actually demonstrate you're leveraging agentic AI to get to that scale and efficiency and productivity, which again, I personally, I never looked at government as a whole as leading adopters of technology. And when we talk about agentic systems where software now has the ability to reason and improve and take action in complex workflow, and do that unsupervised, what are some of the risks that are involved when you're thinking about delegating some of the work to be done to software without human intervention?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really, really good question. I mean, if you think about sort of the paradigm of building things like AI agents, it's completely different than what people have been building before, either traditional applications or SaaS applications. This is not the same kind of thing, right? So, and what I mean by the paradigm differences here is that if you think about traditional apps, like let's say, I don't know, something like a website, or maybe you're building a Java application, in reality, whatever you end up building is very much deterministic in nature, right? Yep. So if I go to a website and you click a button, you're going to go to another page. You may have a form to fill out, etc. That is not the way that agentic AI and AI agents work. It is non-deterministic in nature, okay? And you even added a layer on top of that, which is not only is it non-deterministic in nature, but now you're trying to build something that actually needs to start making decisions, and in many cases start taking actions as well. And so from that perspective, not only is agentic AI different than traditional applications, it's even different than things like generative AI, right? Where you are using ChatGPT to, I don't know, generate a video or something like that, which is great. It generates all these wonderful ideas for you, this new content. But if you're now asking it to make decisions, the landscape gets way, way more complicated than just utilizing things like LLMs and, you know, things like that. And so you almost have to treat these AI agents less like, I don't know, like just a piece of tool, but almost like an operator in themselves. You have to give it responsibilities. You have to think about what kind of actions and things like that it should be able to do. What are the skills and, you know, learning ability that you need? How do you train it almost like a person, again, like an operator, instead of looking at it like a piece of code. And so there's a lot to consider here. And think about from a security point of view, what this also means. If you think about it as an operator instead of just a tool, is, you know, today when people are involved, when operators are involved, there's a lot of social engineering that bad actors can do, right, to get into your environments. Sure. Think about if these things are operators, what kind of social engineering skills now can be utilized to get into AI agents to pull information that they shouldn't have, right? And so there is a bit of a mind shift that needs to happen.
Yeah, and this is going to continue for quite some time, especially when we're seeing where agentic systems are headed. They're actually starting to take action. I mean, the hottest thing on the web right now is used M4s. People are trying to put OpenClaw on them. I mean, you're seeing people actually put this in the live physical environments. So once this stuff is in production, do we know it works? What's the governance? What's the reliability? You know, how do we even know the efficacy? I mean, it feels like we're missing some gaps here as we're putting stuff into agents. It's more than a control tower going forward, right?
Yes, for sure. I mean, you got to think about, you know, just from a testing point of view or from an observability perspective, like what are sort of like the new kind of things that you have to start measuring now, right? It's so it's
no longer your sumo logic experience would come back to help.
It absolutely, it absolutely comes back. It absolutely comes back. So for sumo logic, right, as a security tool and observability tool, if you think about sort of the base of all of the things that end up getting logged, okay, because it's such a strong logging platform. If you can log something to understand how certain events have happened or certain decisions have occurred, you can actually now do some level of control, right, with it. And you can start to tweak things on and off. You can, you know, maybe dial some stuff up, dial some stuff down. I think the challenge here, and this is why I do think AI agents need to go beyond LLMs, the IP needs to go beyond just whatever exists in the model, is that if you just use LLMs to do a lot of these capabilities, not everything is logged. You get what I mean? And so the more and more components as an enterprise that you can move up to the layer above the LLM, the control plane above the LLM, to understand, you know, what are the inputs that are going into the agent? What is the sort of the thinking and decision-making process? What are the events that the agent is now thinking through for you to make a decision? And then looking at the output, once you have those components, you can actually monitor and manage and dial things in a much, much more clearer way.
You know, this and Six Sigma and control systems all come back, man. Because I was looking at, you know, I remember like you're at GE, you're doing all these other things. I mean, you've been a venture capitalist, you've been an investor, you've been an operator, you've been an engineer, an architect. I mean, like, what better, man? All the stuff that you learned is suddenly like,
honestly,
it's both a commodity and a complex system at the same time, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we keep saying that expertise is now a commodity, but experience is not. So this is a very interesting scenario we're in right now, especially with
for sure. A lot of it, you just like, it's very similar disciplines, but you just need to add a new layer to it.
Yes. So
yeah, no, it's polymath CEOs, polymath leadership. You need to synthesize, you need to connect the dots, you need to have contextual understanding. Joe talked about the probabilistic nature of language models, and when things are deterministic, you can determine when you're deviating from norm. System outages are easier to identify, where currently AI failures, because the range is good, better, best, or maybe wrong, they seem to flow, the output seems to flow through the organization without people noticing. So when you have that converged uncertainty, and not just technology, but it could be culture, process, skill, all of the things that help you grow successfully. What do CEOs and boards and decision makers, how do they need to position themselves to understand
good question.
that this is a different ball game? And the rules are sometimes unwritten, sometimes need to be rewritten, and you just have to maybe perhaps just maintain that beginner's mindset, knowing that this is a new world.
Yeah, I think that whole growth mindset piece definitely plays into effect here, right? And that goes beyond even CEOs like myself or anybody in leadership position. The more curious that you are and not afraid of what the technology can do, the more that you play around with it, I feel like if you are one of those growth mindset people, you're going to get much more excited about what's going on. And to give you an idea on how important that portion is I was just at a roundtable discussion with hundreds of C-level executives, and I got a really interesting question 3 different times. Okay, just from a leadership perspective, and the question was, "What does all of this stuff actually mean for my kids?"
My kids.
My kids.
Only question. We're
It's
just
going to
talking
take
about
over
this
jobs.
earlier.
What's it going to do? My answer to them was, listen, I'm not worried about the kids because they're going to be growing up with this technology. They're going to be proficient at it. They're going to know where it works, where it doesn't work. They're going to be interacting with it every day. My 12-year-old uses ChatGPT like nobody's business. She's a pro. Okay. Yeah. She knows how the tokens get burned down, how to go from one free version to another. She's unbelievable in terms of its usage. I'm not worried about the kids. I'm more worried about leaders understanding that you do need the growth mindset back, the learner's ability, and just go play around with it because it's such an enabler. It's such an enabler for people. It'll free up time for you to be able to do some incredible amount of work when you are no longer doing just the busy work. So that for sure is I think the first thing that you got to think through. The second thing is, there are certain technical components here that people do need some enablement on for sure. It's not hard. I don't think it's the world's most difficult thing to do, but having some level of enablement and understanding is very, very, very important. Yeah. It's not going to be at this point the magic sauce of it does everything. I think you've talked to people that think that AI is going to do literally everything. It's not quite that. And then you have folks that are much more pessimistic, it actually can't do anything. Yeah. Which is also not true.
Yeah, it's definitely not true. Yeah.
And what's funny is it's the more technical people that tend to land in that side of the camp. Yeah. But my thing is just go play around with it, and then you understand with it. And even with our customers, what we find is the aha moment inevitably comes the first time that you create an agent and you actually launch it into your enterprise. There is definitely an aha moment that it just sticks in, and then it spreads like wildfire in an organization.
Joe, for someone who's in an ecosystem or at a company where we're approaching 300 active agents, it's clear to me that this is as much as we want to talk about technology transformation, it's really relational transformation.
Oh,
because
yeah.
when you redesign a process and you onboard agents and you realize, okay, I now have human labor that I can assign to value creation that perhaps I've ignored in the past. You go from redesigning a process to having to reskill your human labor, and then you have to restructure your costs as you allocate resources. We've done 3,000 to 4,000 internal hires just because we had to redeploy human resources to different functions because agents are now doing the deterministic, boring. I would say it could be high impact, but
like busy kind of work, right?
Busy kind of work.
Yeah,
but they're redesigning, the reskilling, the restructuring, the redeployment. These are all emotional, human. I got to go to a line of business leader and say, I now have to take your budget on because I just transferred your people into my unit. To do work that we need to do that we ignored in the past, latent value. So this is, I'm telling you, the messy beginning and middle is like you said, the technology isn't it's not rocket science. It's manageable. Yes. But the other stuff, it can get pretty, it can be very disruptive. So you need CEOs like yourself that can kind of shepherd this whole relational part of the journey, not the
not just the tech. Absolutely.
So Joe, we hosted 120 public CEOs and board of directors a few weeks ago for our CEO comments. It's our Futures Forum. And we learned a couple things. One, the CEO has become the chief AI officer. But the second thing is for the companies that, so we've always had this notion that AI exponential, AI native companies were going to dominate the world. But what we realized was it's not going to happen the other way. It's the companies that are actually have distribution, have their moats that are in place, because AI is now a commodity. And because it's a commodity, it's going to be very hard for an AI exponential or AI native company to disrupt an existing company that's already using the same technology, because the same advantages have now been equalized. And I think that's the missing piece that we realized at this event, is that if you don't hurry now, you could get disrupted. But you actually, unlike the internet, you actually have a shot here. And that's the thing the CEOs have suddenly discovered. And then the third thing was you are in the critical path. So if you think you're getting rid of hundreds and thousands of people, not yet. Because while you could have sent a team out to figure out something for 2 weeks, and they come back and tell you, another team comes back and tells you another week, and then you assemble everything to put this in a linear kind of model. It's not happening like that anymore. Things are coming back to you in like seconds. And now you got to make the decision. And it turns out it's the human that's actually holding up everything. And so some of the humans in the critical path. And so it's like, okay, wait, I can't get rid of anyone right now because like this thing's coming at me faster than I could imagine. And it's down to getting the most experienced people you can. So it's an interesting thing, but we're watching our clients go through this journey, and it's fascinating to see, like, they're like, oh yeah, I can't get rid of anyone here. I can't get it. So it comes down to which decision trees do you want to collapse, and when and where do you want to insert a human? And it's the most fascinating thing. Like when you're watching that transformation in the CEO's mind, where they're like, oh my God, this is what I need to do. Then you realize it. And we're going to see, I'm going to put a bet right here. We're going to see more CEOs retire in the next 2 years because they just don't want to play in that game. And it's going to open up the biggest leadership, like the revolution we've ever seen for the folks that get it versus the folks that don't. So, but back to your point, you go back to Marquette University, you're doing some recruiting. What are you looking for?
Who are you looking for?
Who am I looking for?
What are you looking for? You know, are you looking for the dropout, the kids that dropped out? Are you looking for the kids that started a startup but didn't finish college? Are you looking for certain
hey, look, just because I'm sitting here with the startup native AI company doesn't mean that's exactly what I'm looking for. You're putting me in a box here. Don't do that to me.
Okay. What are you looking for in recruiting in general? I mean, like, what are you looking for? Skills at the mid-level, skills at the senior level. Like, what do you need?
I think in reality, it's, just from a capability perspective, right? I don't think it's all that different than what I would be looking for anyway in any other startup, right? And the reason why I say that is, one, like I said, like curiosity and growth mindset here is like super, super important. Super important, right?
So that never changes.
That never changes. And then even some of the other stuff is pretty, like it would be things that don't change. As you look across from sort of the junior level all the way to senior level for folks, is that curiosity needs to be there, that hunger needs to be there. Think about projects.
I didn't mean to put you in a box. I'm just kind of curious.
No, I'm joking, Ray. I am just trying to put a smile on your face. The second piece that I'll say is, like, think about as you're going up the scale is even for projects that you run that is successful versus not successful, it does still come down to like outcomes, ROI. It comes down to product market fit, project market fit, all of these things that you needed to do before. It's even more important now with at least the spin into AI. Think about from a management point of view. I had a super interesting discussion with a development manager at Google. Okay, he came over to me. He's like, Joe, this stuff is amazing. It's like having 100 junior developers. I'm like, that's awesome. What's the problem? He's like, it's like having 100 junior developers, right? Like because they're always coming back. They're like, is this right? Should I modify it? Like in terms of
path, stuck in the critical path.
Yeah, exactly. So, but if you're a really good manager and you know how to manage people that way, and if you think about these AI agents that are doing stuff for you, again, more like operators, more like people, those skills do translate. Now, obviously, you need other, technologies and things like that to help you manage those things. And, obviously at DRUID, we provide those capabilities. But I think all of the things in terms of those skills, it still translates, big time between pre-AI and post-AI in terms of where we are right now.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I tell my kids, high rate of learning and good judgment. That's always going to be.
It doesn't go away.
It doesn't go away. So, and they're like, Dad, what does that mean? I'm like, listen, if you can read, you can write, and you can speak well, you're unstoppable. Just keep, be able to, do those three things well, and you'll be okay. Okay, we asked you about assessing talent as you bring them to your high growth environment at DRUID. What do you look for when you assess whether a company's AI infrastructure is built to last? What are some of the things that are markers that tell you, okay, this is a company that's on the right track?
Yeah, it's a really good question, Val. I think, over time, and we just mentioned this as well, is like, I think if you look at all of the LLM models, I think for most people, they can see that over time, this stuff is going to get more and more commoditized.
Sure.
Right, across the board. So when you are now starting to focus on people around, models and models and models, which was the case, I want to say even 2 years ago, that probably was the right thing to do. Right now, that it's less the right thing to do. So like my first red flag is, are you talking about the models, or are you talking about the layers that give you additional agentic capabilities on top of it? If you're now starting to talk about the things on top of it, that I feel like you're more ready to adopt some of these capabilities. And a lot of this stuff, again, with an AI spin, is going to go down to just good infrastructure design to begin with. The first thing that I would think about is like modularity. Is the first thing I think about in terms of architecture. Can you swap components around as or do you have to rewrite everything?
Okay.
So if I build agents in one platform, and can I take that somewhere else? Am I not locked in? If I go from one LLM model to another LLM model, do I have to rewrite all of the agents? And the answer to that is no, and you have these modularity components built in. That means that you're in a pretty decent spot. So that's one I look for. Two is, how do you handle everything to do with your underlying data? Okay. Can you handle structured data? Can you handle unstructured data? Can you handle one LLM, multiple LLMs, SLMs, etc.? And can you gracefully integrate these things together and gracefully use the right data or right LLM modeling in your agent? So that number two is still true, right? I mean, that doesn't go away. Garbage in, garbage out. Sure. How clean is your data, right? And so that for sure, I think having an approach for it and if you have it cleaned up and it's integratable, you're more than on your way to go. Third thing is, and we touched upon it quite a bit, is around observability and traceability. Okay. Can you continuously evaluate what your agents are doing and where in the infrastructure stack is the determination being made, and can you dial things up or down or even turn it off or on? Okay. So that would be number three. The fourth one will be, can you build the AI agent? Can you tune the AI agent? Can you version the AI agent? Can you go from one version of the AI agent to the other and then roll it back if something is not working? Is another component that I look for in the kind of the SDLC. What does the SDK look like? What does the CI/CD pipeline look like, etc.? And then the last one that I would include in there is going to be around, can you tune and scale between the cost and the outcome that you are looking for?
Joe, those are foundational. Those are foundational.
Yeah, you know what I mean? So like, how much money are you actually using to get the outcome that you want? And if it is like, you can use other technologies to get the same kind of outcome or something close to it, maybe you got to look at something else, right? What is my
efficiency is everything right now.
Yeah, exactly. Tokens are getting burned down like nobody's business.
Yeah.
Is that the way that you have to do something? In a lot of the cases, what you're going to find is no. Yeah. And so is there a way for you to be able to measure it? And, again, with modularity and everything else, you can then swap agents in and out for certain outcomes.
Joe, you just outlined 6 chapters in your book titled Built to Last. So you literally just expand a few thousand words.
Yeah, this is your new book, man, Joe. We're glad you launched it here on DisrupTV. We're glad you launched it here. Two more chapters.
It's an automatic bestseller, what you just, in the last 2 minutes.
Yeah, have your team do this, man.
Right there.
There's 2 more chapters: security by design, right?
Yes.
And making sure authenticity and identity, the ability. And the last chapter will be transferring memory across systems. So, I mean, that's your book, dude. You got it. So,
Joe, you have a bestseller you're sitting on. I'm just saying.
We can't let you not write this, man.
The guardrails are really important, Ray. The guardrails here are really, really important. I mean, there was a whole conversation around, AGI that's been happening since the, beginning of the year. Like, are we going to get there? Are we already there? That type of thing. And instead of, thinking about it from the term of the technology, I kind of think about it more from the market. Is the market going to force us to build certain things, right? Mm-hmm. And so if I think about, no matter if you're starting from our side, which is more agentic and conversational AI, or if you're starting from OpenAI, Anthropic on the more the generative AI components, I think over time, what enterprises are going to be looking for is going to be systems that not only generate ideas, okay, like a generative AI technology, but they're going to want it to be able to make decisions and actions, drive efficiency, et cetera, and then ultimately have the ability to interact with people as well, right, over time.
Definitely right.
And without guardrails, we're going to unintentionally end up in like AGI situations where maybe you have agents like doing outcomes that you did not anticipate if we're not very careful. So Ray, what you mentioned around security and compliance, it's a huge deal right now in the agentic space.
Joe, we could be talking to you for hours on this topic. Come join us September 24th at the Harvard Club. We have our we do our AI forum. We bring together 60, 80 chief AI officers. We'll talk to you more. But here with Joe Kim, President, CEO of DRUID AI, an entrepreneur, architect, and of course, CEO material and venture capitalist. You're like everything, dude. You did the whole round. You get to see it from multiple pieces.
Hey, look, I have diverse set of interests. What are you going to do with that, right?
keep putting a dent in the universe, Joe. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for being a Polymath CEO.
Thank you.
Thank you, Vala.
New leaders are on the rise, Vala. It's a new type of leadership here. This is quite interesting.
My youngest is 16. I definitely need advice on how to guide his next 6 years of education and what he's going to do after. And I'm an immigrant dad, so I expect maybe even graduate work for him. So it might be next 8 to 10 years. But my mom still is disappointed I didn't get my PhD. I can't get her
There's still time, Vala. There's still time.
You can't. You're in the same boat, Ray. I've met your parents.
Your mom shouldn't talk to my mom. We'll be fine.
But let's talk about what matters most, especially now in this AI-powered economy, and that's leadership and disruptive leadership. Paul McCarthy, author of The F.I.R.E.D Leader, Reinventing Future of Leadership. And F.I.R.E.D Leader book came out last year. Premise of the book: to survive disruption, organizations need disruptive leaders. So they hire them, and then they fire them. So it's an open secret. Everyone in the leadership industry knows, but nobody is addressing. Leadership culture is toxic, and leadership systems have failed. Publicly, organizations say they want leaders to be innovative thinkers who challenge the status quo. Privately, conventional leadership culture wants nothing of the sort. So we're going to talk about that. Paul has spent nearly 3 decades inside leadership industries, advising global organizations, designing programs, and watching complexity rise while the results stay flat. Paul's a global thought leader, creating conditions to reimagine, reinvent, and regenerate future of leadership. He's helped organizations reimagine how they identify, recruit, and develop future-ready leaders and disruptive leadership capabilities who can thrive in complexity and regenerate leadership from within. Through F.I.R.E.D pilots, F.I.R.E.D labs, and a range of F.I.R.E.D leadership programs, Paul supports leadership systems to adapt, evolve, and deliver results that matter. Welcome, Paul, to DisrupTV.
Well, that was a mouthful to say, Vala.
Like Joe, I had to cut your bio, maybe to a third, because we only have a few minutes. So
I was sitting behind backstage listening to Joe, and I was just I wanted you to bring me into the conversation because exactly what he's talking about is what I'm working on. And I found it really interesting over the last 8 years of my 30-year career or so, that isn't it interesting that we celebrate disruptive technologies, but we don't celebrate the leaders with the disruptive capabilities that brought us those technologies? And that's kind of what was coming up in my mind when I was listening to Joe, because we've kind of got this idea that our approach to leadership works, but with this major disruption that we've all been talking about for the last few years, AI, that's just one, by the way, that's just the latest shiny object. We are still using outdated playbooks to prepare leaders. So Joe's point about the operator mindset and the operator mindset of a leader going forward will become even more important. as we move forward. So whoever said new leaders are on the rise, new leaders that are coming up desperately need a different playbook, because they're not going to be able to successfully navigate disruption going forward. So great segue to this conversation. So I'm looking forward to wherever we take this.
I was trying, Paul. We were really trying to bridge it. No, I was kidding. No, but hey, on a real level here, the first principles issue with leadership comes down to the board. We have a situation where the boards are not even able to imagine the type of leaders they need, and the shareholders aren't there. So this is why they've standardized leadership, right? It's about governance and audit and mitigating risk. And I mean, that's why you don't have maverick leaders unless it's a founder CEO with the majority of, shares, with a 10-to-1 voting on dual class voting rights, on a stock thing. That's why, because we don't take the bad with the good. Right? I mean, that's the problem. So what do we do? Right? I mean, tell us what this has cost us, because we've standardized leadership and everyone looks the same.
Yeah. Let me let a figure sink in. $400 billion every year is spent on developing leaders around the world every year. That's according to DDI. They're the largest leadership think tank in the world. And let me give you another really startling statistic that a lot of boards are not acknowledging, a lot of leaders are not acknowledging. 14% of that investment in that leadership development thinks that it works. So in other words, 86% of people who buy leadership development and invest in leadership development don't think it works.
Wow.
That's brutal, dude. That's brutal.
So that's
how do we take some of that money
$340 billion spent on outcomes that don't meet expectations.
Yeah, let me take some of that money back. That's a lot of money wasted that we could build something better with.
Well, let me throw another number out there, and this is Gallup. When I started this path 8 years ago to regenerate the future of leadership, I started to look at research, and I was very unpopular in the learning and development, the leadership development world, because I was talking about the elephant in the room. I disrupted people's way of seeing leadership and what we would need for the future. And this is 2017 that I started this conversation. At that point, Gallup had estimated that global disengagement was costing the economy every year $7 trillion. 8 years later, it's now costing $10 trillion. And yet in the intervening 8-year period, we have had more approaches come from organizations to enhance and improve leadership than ever before. And yet the number is still going up, Ray. So these numbers are very alarming for when we think about how do we future-proof organizations to be preparing our leaders to navigate disruption, but also embrace AI and the way that leaders will need to continually integrate the way they use AI as part of their leadership going forward.
Using AI as part of, do you think in the next 5 years we'll see AI as a voting member of a board, or perhaps even a CEO?
Yeah. It's going to be a proxy. I'm sending my proxy over, Vala.
Well, I know Ray's going to replace me with an AI agent at some point, but
how do you know I'm really me, dude? I mean, like I'm already avatarized,
Well, I'm predicting it here, and you heard it here first, that in the next 5 years, you're going to see a lot more therapists focus on AI anxiety therapy, because as we grapple with our relationship with AI and disrupt our own thinking about what it means to be a leader in this increasingly evolving time, we're moving leaders from the trajectory of, hey, we're just using AI as a glorified search engine at the moment, to that's level one, to and that's assuming we can get past the scaremongering, AI's taking our jobs, etc., etc. Most people are at level one, at leadership level at the moment. They're using AI as a glorified Google.
Yeah.
We need to move them to the next conversation and the next level, which is, how do you use AI as a thought partner? So how does it help you to think and decide and operate? So to Joe's point, it becomes an operator at the table. But the bit that really interests me is level 3. How do we integrate AI into the way we lead, so it becomes a strategic partner. Now, this mindset Joe referred to in the growth mindset, and I know Carol Dweck's work very well. I also know that the work from Francesca Gino around curiosity as a leadership competency. It's the I in my F.I.R.E.D framework, inquisitive nature. We're actually sending contradictory messages. So we want leaders to embrace AI, but we're not aware of the maturity of these leaders at the moment in terms of what we need to do to get them to level 3. Because most leaders and boards, Ray, to your point, that I'm speaking with, they are petrified of AI and integrating it into the way they lead, because they believe that it's starting to fracture their identity as a leader, and they don't know who they are and how to lead. So new leaders are increasingly realizing that the playbooks that they've inherited are not fit for purpose. And we desperately, again, need a different approach. We need to disrupt our thinking about how leadership may have worked in the past. It didn't, by the way, spoiler alert, into what we need to go forward with as leadership industry. And I've been talking about it for 8 years, and I've been a thorn in the side of a lot of the leadership industry players. But my book came out a few years ago, and you can see behind me, I don't know if this side, I was at the Thinkers 50 conference back in November in London, and I talked about
how was it?
It was good. It was interesting because I had a number of thought leaders that endorsed this book come up to me and say, does the theme of this conference validate your work? Because the theme was about regeneration.
Yeah.
And I was like, no, not at all, because now the hard work begins. I've been the Trojan horse for 8 years, saying we need a different approach, and nobody was listening until they couldn't listen anymore. They had to start listening. Now we're at a conversation point where we are now realizing, and this is perhaps really quite distressing. This might be the first time you've heard it, and if it is, I'll gleefully share the information and research. But every year, the Global Innovation Index is a report that comes out, and it shows across the world the level of innovation by countries.
Yep.
And it shows unequivocally, Ray, that if we don't continue to invest and identify, cultivate, and embrace talent and leaders that have disruptive leadership capabilities, that we will cease to be competitive at the GDP level. Now we take that down to industry level. Now we take it down to organizational level. Now let's take it down to leadership level. We have got our next COVID on the horizon in terms of the leadership industry is approaching a cliff, and it is woefully unprepared for what's coming. And we're starting to see it because emerging leaders, and that new leader in an organization won't stay or join your organization unless these things get addressed. Yeah. And so there's some real headline figures that people are starting to wake up.
Give us an example. Give the audience an example of what some of these innovation clusters are when they talk about it. Like I kind of remember reading this, but I don't know. Like there's several innovation clusters that are there, and you're saying that these innovation clusters are atrophying.
Well, I mean, innovation is an output, right? So the way that my work looks at innovation, and I call them F.I.R.E.D leadership labs, is to get leaders into a lab environment where you're getting them to pressure test whether something works. And the F in the F.I.R.E.D framework is fresh thinking. So fresh thinking is the ability of leaders to dare to think and act differently, because that's what then leads to disruptive thinking, which leads to disruption, which then leads to innovation as an output. So I've got clients to pressure test this by saying, right, one group, one cluster, apply the F.I.R.E.D leadership philosophy, mindset, and approach and framework to a problem. And one cluster, just do the regular approach that you would take. And the data coming from both of these clusters is phenomenal. When you unleash someone's ability to be creative and don't worry about breaking the rules or coloring in between the lines, blowing up the box, as it were, right? When you do that, you unleash, and Jim Collins calls, good to great and built to last. You mentioned that in the last conversation with Joe. But those books already exist where they talk about this, right? And unleashing that innovation and that spark of being introducing non-linear thinking and approaches that through the traditional model would be pretty much vetoed. When you allow them to think without any boundaries stopping them, the results of creativity and innovation go through the roof. And so there's some real data sets out there that speak to this. And so I'm on a mission to normalize and standardize that as a way of embracing our future leaders. Imagine how cool it would be if every leadership identification, recruitment, onboarding, and development system and process and framework incorporated these kinds of leaders, the way they think. Because currently, I can tell you as well, they're being marginalized in the recruitment processes. So, you know, you referred to, you know, with Joe, I just wrote down some notes here. It's like, how do you identify and engage those kinds of leaders? Well, the first thing you need to do is you need to take a good, cold, hard look at the effectiveness of whether your leadership systems and pipeline are designed to be future ready. How are they encouraging people to be innovative? They're not. You know, in fact, and Francesca Gino's research found a few years ago from HBR, the business case for curiosity, that everybody says they want curiosity, and it's a great hashtag, and it's a great thing to put on the wall by the elevator in the corporate headquarters. But when they try and demonstrate it, they realize that they get marginalized because that demonstrates a different way of thinking than the group think. And what then came out was HR leaders, L&D professionals, heads of leadership development think that it's too expensive to encourage organizations to be curious because it doesn't produce fast enough outputs. Now, just think about that for a minute. The world we're in, as you mentioned, the pace of innovation rate, it's only going to increase. So we need systems and processes and approaches to leadership that can keep up with that and, in fact, preempt and look around corners. And the systems we have now don't.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Yeah,
I think because for so long we've been told or reminded that to reach optimal velocity, speed, and direction, you need to have alignment. You need to build consensus. So you tend to gravitate towards groupthink because the more curious you are, the more questions you have, the more you challenge dominant logic, the more creative you are, the more you may be, affecting alignment, which in turn affects speed and velocity. So how do you, like, if I'm picking up your book, I'm a CEO, I pick up your book. What are some of the beliefs that I'm going to leave behind? And what are some of the beliefs and practices that I should immediately implement? Give us advice in terms of what you hope the takeaway is from someone who picks up F.I.R.E.D. And also do us a favor, fresh thinking, inquisitive, spell out F.I.R.E.D. for us so our readers know the acronym.
Yeah, so the background to these 5 qualities are quite simple. My story, I was one of those renegade leaders, rebellious, disruptive, because I was asked to come on board to be those kinds of things. And when I did, I got my wrist slapped. So I came into organizations saying, we want disruption. I can hear you, Vala, laughing. So this is not something that's just my story. Millions of people
have been on a disruptive path. We have battle scars. We have
this is why on DisrupTV. This is why on DisrupTV.
I got a loyalty card to the School of Disruptive Leadership. So we talk about this, and by the way, this contributes to the 400 billion that I mentioned earlier, right? And the 10 trillion in disengagement. But also the sobering stat is right now, HBR estimates that 1 in 4, I think it's 2 in 4 of your high performance leaders are thinking of leaving the organization because there's a mismatch, right? So again, succession planning, pipeline management is something that's coming that we're not really looking at. But I was fired as a leader for having these qualities that were asked to be demonstrated. So instead of just updating my resume and going into a corner and being upset, my expertise was actually developing C-suite leaders, right, as a consultant. So I'd go in there and I'd develop the capacity, capability, and competency of leaders. And I had to also look at the research on the horizon to say, are we developing the leaders that we need for the future? And this, back in 2017, I tried to prove or disprove a hypothesis. Believe me, I didn't want to write this book. I didn't want to do any of this. I wanted to stay in the corner office that I had on my dead mother's life. That was what I wanted to do. And I couldn't turn my eye away from the fact that there was this hypocrisy that we weren't talking about. Put all these things on the wall, but we don't live them. We don't align to them. So I started asking these difficult questions. Was I fired for having all these qualities? And were these qualities what we needed in the future? I spent 1.5 years of my life trying to disprove or prove that. And ultimately, I realized from the research and all the people that Chief People Officer, Chief Talent Officer, all that I spoke to, there are 5 missing qualities from the way we develop leaders that we will increasingly need. I used that research, those outputs, and I turned it into F.I.R.E.D. Fresh thinking, inquisitive nature, real and accountable, expressive and challenging, and direct and transparent. And this book has a methodology, a framework, a diagnostic, an enterprise maturity model, all that stuff that you would expect to be able to help organizations and leaders to identify these qualities in their leaders. In fact, my challenge to Joe is to think, okay, which of your future leaders have these qualities? Because they're the ones that you're going to need with the operator mindset to navigate AI effectively and be the next generation of ambassadors. So back to your question around, if a CEO or someone's looking at this book, what do they need to let go of? Well, firstly, they need to be open to disrupting their thinking. They need to be able to step out of, most of us lead from a place of our own experience, the inputs, the books we've read, the challenges that we've had. But we need to step out of that. So we need to disrupt the way that we think. And also related to that, we need to let go of old playbooks. We need to trust the fact that we need a different playbook that we're developing as we go, right? Because the old playbook really didn't work, but we've relied on it, and it was all we had. Again, it contributed to that $400 billion deficit that we have. So outdated playbooks, and also look for those people that you want to marginalize, the non-linear thinkers, the disruptors, the rebelliousness, those qualities, believe it or not, underneath the surface of all that, leaders that have those qualities are purpose-driven. They want to contribute. They don't want to just cause trouble for the sake of it. They want to move your organization forward. Reference back to what I mentioned at the beginning. We celebrate disruptive technologies, but we don't celebrate the leadership capabilities that brought us those technologies. And we need to shift our minds. So to Joe's point, how do we keep our mindset open? A beginner's mindset, a curious mindset. So there are 2 things that I would suggest straight off the bat.
Paul, are organizations unintentionally filtering out their very best leaders that they need for the future because of this? And can they prevent this? Is it something that they want to prevent? I mean, maybe we should start with that question.
I mean, the simple answer is yes, Ray, they are. And I'm actually speaking at the PSYOP conference next week in New Orleans about this. I'm actually talking about toxic leadership and the antidote to toxic leadership and this whole dysfunction at systemic level, and how fired leadership can actually support the evolution of the leadership industry. So yes, they're filtering out because we still have the majority of leadership approaches are looking for sameness. They're looking for consistency, and they are reinforcing, whether they're conscious of it or not, that leadership groupthink. But actually, what are being filtered out are those challengers, those truth tellers, those misfits. And the irony of this is that, I've worked with thousands of leaders and hundreds of leadership teams, and I've gone into all of their offices, in person and virtually. And you can see my books behind me. And I've kind of seen all the books that they read about leadership, the great books from Marshall Goldsmith, Gary Hamel, John Spence, and a bunch of others. I've then seen, all these nice things on the wall that they talk about with leadership and the way we treat leaders. And then I've seen the way that they lead. And there's a complete incongruence. So they're the 3 data points I talk about in my book, Vala. And it's like, unless we can disrupt our patterns of thinking about that, then my fear is that we're going to continue to have those disengagement figures rise. The lack of ROI on leadership development will rise. And actually, emerging and future leaders, they don't want to be leaders in this current approach to leadership. That's more worrying than anything else.
It's such a reminder when you talk about legacy thinking, and I listen to you, and I think ultimately the way we need to hire chefs. We need not cooks. These cooks that follow recipes and they learn by analogy, not first principle, and they don't taste the ingredients. They don't know, in the absence of a recipe, how to make a delicious meal because they don't know how to combine these ingredients. And you don't even, great restaurants, they have chefs, they don't have cooks.
Nope.
And these chefs challenge assumptions, starting with their own. They have a safe space to experiment. And if you know the outcome, it's not an experiment. So they truly are experimenting. So and ultimately in their career, they're going to get fired because most places, like you said, don't have a tolerance. They want somebody that can just follow a recipe, produce at scale, better sameness. And the easiest thing to replace is sameness. So I listen to you and say, Paul is telling us be more like a chef than a cook. I love the F.I.R.E.D, but I think you're also hinting at, if you're truly disruptive thinker, you are going to potentially get fired. So be ready for those battle scars, because unless you find a place that encourages, people aren't afraid of failure, they're afraid of blame. If you can find a place where you're encouraged to make mistakes as part of the learning process and be disruptive, stay. Otherwise, be ready for what could be a tough journey. I enjoy your message.
The deeper core narrative that underpins my work and everyone I speak with is actually reframing the way that we see disruption. Because at the moment, and you guys see it probably all the time, people are using the word disruption in a sexy hashtag, bumper sticker way. But we also have this idea about, if you're a disruptor in an organization, then you're bad news, you're a troublemaker. Yeah. What if we could shift that around to say, these are the game changers. These are the ones that we need as our guides going forward. So, I think about Melody Hobson, who's the co-CEO of Ariel Investments. One of the things that she does is she mandates challenging with her co-CEO and expects that with every other leader that reports into her and her co-CEO. They've enshrined that into the DNA of the organization. The result, they're a market leader, right? It's not a coincidence, and I go back to the Global Innovation Index research. It's not a coincidence. The most successful countries at a GDP level have embraced disruptive thinking in their talent and leaders. That is not a coincidence. And what we need to get over is our ability to not see the advantages that disruptors bring, because we think, a disruptor comes in and just throws a grenade in the middle of the room for the sake of it. No, they're the one that comes in and says, you know what, the market's going this way, we're going this way, our competitors are going that way. We don't have the talent that we need to be exceeding our competition. They disrupt outdated logic. They're the ones that we actually need to help us navigate. And so COVID was an accelerator of this conversation for me. AI is another accelerator for this conversation. And with the rise of agentic AI and what that's going to force leaders to do, and the relationship. I mean, I was in a senior audience a few weeks ago, and I asked a very simple, innocent question. Now, these were leaders at the top of the house, responsible for directing the flow of where AI goes as a strategic priority. Brilliant organization, brilliant people. And I asked them the question, what is the relationship that you will increasingly need to be open to having with AI as a leader? They reacted in a way that was very emotionally charged, because what it does is it makes them uncomfortable. It gets them asking the questions beneath the surface, which a lot of organizations, leaders are not doing. So we need to start asking that question more and more. And the answer is going to be uncomfortable, but there is a path forward.
Joe, we are almost out of time. Paul, we're so much out of time, and we're going to really have to think about how these new leaders transform organizations in the time frames that they're given. It's going to be, the time frame crunch is crazy, given that we have a short-term board thinking, short-term market thinking. Maybe a lot more companies will have to go private to make that change. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens. Paul McCarthy, author of The F.I.R.E.D Leader. This is a great book. Definitely check it out. came out in 2023. It's going to be evergreen. We know that. So thank you so much. Catch the book on Amazon. More importantly, are you speaking anywhere soon? PsyOps? What date is that?
Yeah, it's 29th of April to the 2nd of May. I'm on a panel with 3 professors on the 30th talking about this stuff, talking about toxic leadership. And, you know, we're getting some good responses to that. And again, that's an important conversation to have. So anyone that's at PsyOp, come and say hi. We'd happily chat.
Thank you, Paul.
Thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Happy Friday.
Thank you. Yeah, people are uncomfortable talking about it because we don't have relationship design as a formal practice in business. You have experience design, you have management leadership design, but I've never in my 30 years participated in relationship design. And this is a world where all work is teamwork. Everyone's using agents. I think there is no single contributor anymore. I've got 65,000 people in my company that use agents every day. And there's no technology in the life of the 27 years of my company where 60,000 plus people were using anything every single day, and now they are. So it's a whole new it's a whole new world. Speaking of a new world, new episode next Friday. We have Andre Pinar, Chief Executive and founder of C5 Capital, with us. We have Dr. David Bray, one of our favorites, distinguished chair of the Accelerated Stimson Center, and he's the CEO of LDA Ventures. And we have Andre Blanc, author of Governing Pandora, Leading in the Age of Generative AI and Exponential Technology. Ray, I'm finding out there's a theme here where we cover this particular technology on a weekly basis. That's awesome.
Never heard of it.
Well, never heard of it. If it's Friday, it's DisrupTV. Thank you, everyone, for watching. We'll see you next week. Bye, everyone.
Happy Friday.